Well, hi, everybody. Last session. Oh boy, I don't know if we should have a Friday cocktail already. It is a long weekend. Melissa and I are super excited to be here. And I think it's going to be a really fun conversation all about cars and everything that is going on at Cadillac. So I'd like to welcome Melissa Grady Diaz. I don't know, I feel like we need applause for you, Melissa.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I agree. Fun to be here on a Friday before a long weekend. What a good way to start with some fun conversation.
Exactly. And what an amazing time to be at Cadillac. You may have the best job in the automotive space right now. You know, thinking back to CES, we all weren't there together, but Mary, the CEO of GM, announcing so much innovation in and around electric cars, in and around driver capabilities and experience. And so I'd love to start there. You know, you're here for it in this moment, and you get to be at the most innovative brand, even within, I think, the portfolio, right? With Cadillac promising to be ahead of the EV movement, even ahead of the broader GM portion of the company. So kick us off with, you know, everything you announced at CES, and tell everybody about the Lyriq, which I think is more of a jewelry box on wheels. So take it away.
Explain why I have the best job in automotive. Absolutely. So yeah, it is a really, really exciting time to be at both Cadillac and GM. GM's vision is 0, 0, 0, 0 crashes, 0 congestion, and of course, 0 emissions. And as we move to that, we are really trying to accelerate not even the industry, but just everyone moving into EV. So it really gives a lot of purpose, going back to the last conversation, it gives a lot of purpose to what we do and to really how we feel every day when we're working. We had a lot of announcements at CES. One of them was the Silverado EV. That's a Chevy product, which will be an EV pickup. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So I really encourage everyone to go check it out. And then from a Cadillac perspective, we were really talking about autonomous and this very future vision of where we're going, which is, you know, we have something called the iSpace, which is if you start to think about travel, moving into, as we think about autonomous driving, right now, that really means hands-free driving. But where that's moving to is this luxurious pod. I think of it almost like if you think about on an airplane, a first class pod where you're just relaxing, you have movies. This can even get into biometrics, so it can work into scent and temperature to make sure that you're comfortable. And so it becomes, instead of you know, an active journey as you're going longer distances, a really passive experience for you where you can read, you can get work done, you can relax. So really absolutely amazing as we start to look at that future vision. On the road to that, we have the Lyriq, which, as you said, is you know, I think a jewelry box on wheels is a great way to describe it. The Lyriq is absolutely one of my favorite vehicles that I've ever not even worked on, but seen. I can't wait to get mine. It is Cadillac's first EV, and it's just absolutely beautiful. There's all these little jeweled elements. There's little surprises within. We have the merlettes, are the little ducks that used to be in our crest, and those are hidden throughout the vehicle. But it's absolutely amazing. It's got over 300 miles of range, and is the beginning of the transformation at Cadillac.
Yeah, I know when I was looking at the car, I know, you know, your interiors designer is a female, and I was thinking that the dial looks a lot like a Rolex wristband, that like jeweled dial.
It's definitely like got the jeweled look to it. There's the knurling around it. It's really beautiful.
So you're you're internal at a big car company. Share with us a little bit more about this cockpit experience and what you guys are forecasting are going to be the new behaviors, because it's an incredible shift to think that the 4 hours plus that people spend, maybe not, you know, this last year, but the 4 hours plus that most Americans spend in their cars. I think we can all think about the tasks that is. It's paying attention and being safe and 2 hands on the wheel, and all just more traditional driver behaviors. But when you think about autonomous, and then you think about electric and the planning required for that, And then you think about this beautiful experience with all these screens. What does that look like? And maybe the future is not that far off in terms of this big shift for in-car experience for passengers.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people have heard this said before. There will be more change in the next 5 years of automotive than there has been in the past 50. And a lot of what that looks like, and it's this path to what I was talking about with this autonomous experience, but the in-car experience. And it's sort of like if you think about the evolution of a cell phone and how a cell phone went from a, dial pad and you could talk on the phone to this whole software enabled app universe that allows the phone to be so many other things: entertainment, an exercise tracker. It facilitates our meetings. We could be doing this on our phone. It's this amazing thing that happens once you bring in the software ecosystem. That's what's about to happen on the vehicle. And so as we start to look at what is enabled by being able to download software, by over-the-air updates that are coming, the way that we interact with the cars, the way that we can personalize our vehicles, both before we get them, so that they're ready when we get into them, and then once we have them, you're used to your car, you drive off the lot, and then, there's the saying of like, your car was like at its highest value and the best that it'll ever be when you drive it off the lot. That's changing. Our vehicles are going to start getting better and better over time because of us being able to download software and change the experience. So it's pretty amazing once you start to really think through the implications of this.
Yeah, and I think you and I talked in the prep. I have a car that does update over the air, and the car I bought is not the car I have 3 years later. And so as a marketer, to continue to sell a car week over week, month over month, given that reality, and then stay connected to the customers that are your existing drivers, like how does that impact just the basics of how you think about media and creative? Because it's not like, here's the car, here's the brochure, here's the 30-second ad that's going to work for an entire model year even.
Yeah, it's, I think we've already, with vehicles, you think about how do you enhance that ownership experience, because we're not a short cycle purchase, it's a much longer cycle purchase. And so, in automotive for years and years, we've been thinking about owner programs and how do we communicate people and what does that look like. This opens it up to the next level to make it so much more fun. So, whereas your emails before may have started with tips and tricks and then kind of trickled down over time, so you were just part of the family until now your lease is almost up, what are we going to tell you? This is now moving into, in-app, in-vehicle, still emails, but how do you engage with the car? How do we let people know about these fun software drops that are coming? I mean, it's turning it into, it's turning an area of the business that's been a little bit, I love the puns, it's been on autopilot for years, into something that is really exciting and will allow each person to have a unique vehicle that they want. And we get to help enable that. So we think about, how is the app going to evolve? How do we target owners and let them know about this? What's the in-vehicle experience that we're controlling? And it's a whole new world.
But what comes with personalization and, this one-to-one connection creates many a challenge in terms of addressing audiences, understanding who your audience is and who the potential customer base is for this car line and this big evolution. How are you going to leverage data and consumer insights along the way to, make sure you're like showing up in that authentic way to all of this customer base that you need to drive?
Yeah, this is something that has really been core to Cadillac's strategy for quite some time. So we basically, we look at demographics, but we basically threw away demographics a few years ago. We don't target by demographics. So we try to first understand on an individual basis who is our target, and we actually modeled out the whole entire US and did a propensity model. And so now we know who are most likely, I call them our future Cadillac family, like who are those people? And then with that, because we now know who these people are, we can look at how and when and where do we interact with them. The other thing that's really important about that is that we can use that data to have insights about people. And an example is this, which I think it's one of the most fun that I think we really had. And that is, as we went through and analyzed the data, and we used Cadillac owners and modeled out the future owner file from that. And the title that came up the most was president and CEO. And the reason for that is that Cadillac tends to have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of self-made people, these very driven people, and that comes through in the data. And it's so interesting because then we understand the spirit of an entrepreneur, the spirit of someone who is so self-driven, and that can help us understand how do we interact and what's the right way to have this relationship with both our owners and our future owners.
Yeah, I was looking at the Twitter feed for Cadillac preparing for this and just loving the personalities and entrepreneurs, and that those, I think you use the tagline, go with audacity or be iconic, and just this, this spirit for you're trying to connect with someone that has that fire about constantly trying to push themselves, and that we know the Cadillac brand has stood for that for a long time. Will you be working through, social? I hate to bring up the metaverse because it's been talked about for the last 4 days, and I don't think we want to go to an NFT space, but there's still a universe in the digital ecosystem that's evolving pretty quickly. And with everything you stand for, knowing that personality type is one to forge ahead into new spaces, how are you going to show up there? And are you, already coming up with plans for that?
Yeah. So I think so many different ways to go with that. I think as far as trying new things and being at the forefront, it's just something that I personally really believe in. I like to always push us to try new things because that's how, when we think about ourselves and how we engage with things, we like to engage with new things. If you think about like digital advertising and banners, if you think about when digital banners first came out, people were really looking at them, clicking on them, interacting with them. Now we have banner blindness, right? So it's a very old school but very relatable example of, same with Facebook. In-feed advertising used to be, when it first came out, you'd look at that and you'd want to interact with it. Now when we look at things, we really have to be doing things very differently. All that going way old school to go way new school, those things, the NFTs, the metaverse, all of that at some point will be something we look back on and say, remember when that was new. So we're definitely going to be in that space. And when I say in that space, more looking at NFTs and what does that mean from a GM and Cadillac perspective. As we look at the metaverse, I think of the metaverse more as how is digital and the web evolving. Things are becoming more immersive. And we find this, we have immersive units that we use in some of our in-market advertising. We've done some AR and VR executions, like at Cadillac Live. We used to have VR in a few of our dealerships. So as you start to look at how are people engaging and how do we make that more immersive, especially, we're all getting very tired of this 2D looking at screens. So how does that all evolve? I think there's so much there. And so what the metaverse means and how that unlocks different things in Web3, et cetera, I think is going to be really interesting over the next year or so. But it's an area where I think we're going to see a lot of fun things, and I'm very excited about.
Yeah, I agree. But you mentioned Cadillac Live, and I apologize. Of course, the gardener is right outside my window with the blower. So that's what happens here in the virtual conference experience. Texting my son, get the gardener. Anyway, Cadillac Live, I would love for you to explain it as we think about retail and retail experiences. And then we cross that over with this personality type you're talking about. I think, a self-made president of their own company has zero time to go into dealership maybe and want to spend an hour and a half researching Cadillac. And so you guys created Cadillac Live. I went through the experience and was super impressed, but tell me about it. Any initial insights or behaviors that you can share about really the future of retail for buying cars?
So I think just to explain to anyone who doesn't know what Cadillac Live is, it's almost like a personal auto show. So we have product specialists that are in a showroom. We have all the Cadillac vehicles there. Not the Lyric all the time yet, but we do have a virtual experience that can be there, and it'll pass through a few times before it comes to market. But basically, you dial in, it's a one-way Zoom call, think of it that way. So your camera's off, so you can be in your PJs with your slippers up on your couch, and you're talking to a product specialist who you can see, they move around the vehicle, they can answer any questions, and they can even show you, if you're a golfer, how do your golf clubs fit in the back of an XT4, XT5, XT6, and Escalade? Where does the stroller fit well? It looks like there's a lot of headroom in the third row of the XT6. Let's have the really tall guy get in there and let me see what that looks like. So it's a really, really unique experience because it is like a personal auto show. It is like you're at a dealership with none of the noise around you, and you just have this focus. So it's been really interesting. I think we had this just before the pandemic. And really the purpose of Cadillac Live is to answer all your questions, to help you get to the point so that you can go to the dealership, kind of get your final questions answered, test drive, and then hopefully purchase. We have really seen, what's amazing is we have some sessions that have gone over an hour. People come in and they really talk. On average, it's more like 10 to 15 minutes. So you're not seeing, those longer sessions all the time, but we're really seeing people ask questions, engage, and it's really amazing. I think it's one of many things that we look at as we look at the future of car buying, which is, as you said, a president, a CEO, an entrepreneur doesn't have a lot of time. We know that we have to meet people where they are. It's really the only way that you can create an experience that people love, and that's really what we want to do. So whether that is meeting you in your living room because you have questions about a car, or getting you the right information in a more immersive and fun way so that you understand things, so that we can help you along the sales process, to enabling as much of the sales process online as possible. Maybe you are really busy and you want to have that whole sales process online. Well, we have something called Shop, Click, Drive that's going to allow you to finish that shopping process. And then you can have the dealer come by, you can sign your documents, they'll deliver the car to your home, and you haven't left. So, if that's what you want, or if you'd rather do a little bit online and then go spend a lot of time in the dealership, we want to be where people are. And so it's a really interesting thing of, if the car buying process used to be somewhat linear and consistent, it's very different and unique now.
Yeah, nothing's linear and consistent anymore, right? I know you have a saying within your team about how you're, thinking about how agile you have to be. I think you call it FFA. And I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about your marketer process right now. You think about everything you just described and all this first party data and insight that you now sit on to inform what marketing and media buying really more specifically looks like. So share that with the audience, because I really enjoyed when we talked about it earlier.
Yeah, so FFA is fast, flexible, and agile. The three words as we think about planning right now, we'll put a plan in place, but what the past 2 years have taught us is that the best laid plans aren't necessarily going to come to fruition. So we have to be fast. We need to be able to react to things. We have to be flexible. If you have a very rigid plan, when these changes come at you, you're unable to react to them, and you get stuck. And agile, and what we mean by agile is really, if you think about an agile process, just get something out, see how it sprint, see how people react to it, see how it works, then add on to that, fix it, keep going. So have this agile process so that we're continually and quickly getting better and reacting to consumer feedback. So that's been really, I think, three of the principles that we've had over the past 2 years. Now, when we look at really the planning process, we really focus on knowing our audience. So we've modeled them out, understanding where they are and making sure that we're in those places, and then showing up differently. So how do we not just run a 30-second spot? how do we understand where people are and figure out how we can really connect with them, which is really important. I think it's very easy for us as marketers to lean on a 30-second spot, and we've really got to move more towards connection.
Yeah. So connection, I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking about connection through creative. I know you are deeply passionate about building immersive and creative experiences. Maybe an example or two of that audience insight that led to something really different and sort of not your standard media experience, but that still generated scale, because I also know that, the greatest ideas, if they don't scale, are not going to drive business outcome that you need, to drive for the business. So
I'll tell you about my favorite example of this right now. And the reason it's my favorite example is because I wasn't a believer. But that being said, I think we as marketers always need to listen to the data, and we need to be ready to take risks. So an example of this was, and if any of my team are watching, they'll be laughing. When we were launching the Lyric, one of the things that we saw that indexed really heavily with our Lyric EV audience was culinary. And, I said, great, but I don't understand how we bring that into a vehicle launch. It's not, I just don't understand how we're going to do that. And if we were to do that, I don't understand how we're going to scale it. And I said, got it. So they came back to me with a proposal, and the proposal was to work with some Michelin chefs, the Michelin star chefs, and have them create a several course meal that was inspired by the Lyric, so that in each course, you're talking about the choreography of the headlights, the beauty of the design, the richness of the interior, all this through food. So that being said, to your point about scale, we created an event, and then I said to the team, now how are we really going to get scale out of this? We've done some work previously with 60-second documentaries. We created 60-second documentaries around this experience. And there's a few things. The event itself, which we had in LA with these chefs, got picked up and was on TV. It was on People magazine. So we really got a lot of scale and just visibility of the vehicle that way. But then these 60-second documentaries, which are, minute long, and you really get to engage with the chefs and hear about the vehicle, those have gotten millions of views. In fact, over 10 million, close to over 15 million views. And so when we look at that, it's something that's going to, if you're interested in these chefs, if you're interested in a culinary event, you're now learning about the vehicle in your language. Because of course, we're always going to have the automotive language and the automotive things, but doing things like that really creates connection. And I was really proud of the end execution and of everyone that worked on it, because I think, they took a really interesting insight and they made it into something that was really unique and created unique connections.
Yeah, I'm looking at the questions here. Lisa had a question that I think is a good follow-up to this, which is, if we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the session around just the EV time that we're in for your brand. And when you think about the types of Americans that are really climate obsessed and very much value doing good and trying to be a part of reversing the environmental impact of, where we are today, how will you consider that customer type, or, that that customer type into, this exact same example, like the chef? Okay, that was great. But now you've got this added business goal that you're trying to drive against an audience that's really specific about their beliefs.
Yeah, I think, that becomes, there's a few things there. I think overall at GM, we're really working on almost being the company version of that person. We're sustainability obsessed. We're figuring out, honestly, how do we accelerate EV? When we look at sustainability from our plant's perspective, and we're already well ahead of schedule on renewable energy and making sure that we're in a good place there. When we look at all that from a corporate perspective, we're driving towards that. And those people who are climate obsessed, or who that's really important to, they are going to know those kinds of things. As Cadillac, we're trying to make sure that we get that information out. I think, if you look at, and I've been paying a lot of attention to the ads lately for sustainability, you're seeing a greater and greater proportion of ads that talk about the company's sustainability promises, goals, et cetera. And I think, it's sort of like a spectrum almost of where you are on it. And we're all going to, as a society, we're moving towards that. I think that by being EV and by using more sustainable materials and driving towards that, it's just a matter of communicating that. But it's really underlying at this point everything that we do. And I think as a society, you're just starting to see that more and more.
Yeah. Well, much of that diversity of storytelling show up with diversity of media mix. I mean, traditionally you see a lot of car ads in the video space. I come from the audio space. Curious about how you think you'll show up. Again, we talked a little bit about the metaverse, but just in places beyond video, which is traditionally where you see the bulk of car investment for obvious reasons of seeing the car do its thing.
I think the visual aspect of the car is very important. So, I think we look at how can we use video, we go back to the word immersive, all of those things. I think there's also, we as a brand have been looking at podcasting and other audio formats where we can tell our story a little bit more, because that's the thing about when you move beyond video, you do sometimes have, because attention tends to be longer, I think, sometimes on audio when you're in that type of format. So it allows us to tell stories more, but we really are, I'm trying to follow the consumers here. So I'm always trying to learn how are people are consuming more and more media, and TV viewership's going down. So people are sort of dispersing their attention, and I want to be where they are, and I want to be interacting with them and telling them what they want to hear and how they want to hear it.
Yeah, and you've used influencers in the past, or authentic voices. We think about there's influencers in the audio space, the video space, the social space. When it comes to ideating with a third party like an influencer, have you seen best practices there? You've done great work, again, posting to Twitter and other communities. But what is the power of that third party validation that drives such a deep connection, but can create such fractured connections across a overarching media plan? So help me understand what's successful there. What challenges have you run into? Where is that headed for you?
I think, when you look at sort of influencers, celebrities, any type of partnership there, for us, the key, and when we see the most success, is when there's a real authentic connection. And I think, to go back to, for us, for a huge example of this is with Regina King. And we, moving in, like just before the pandemic, had rewritten our brand manifesto. And it was really talking about the Cadillac insight about this driven person who reaches a goal and then sort of says, what's next for me? How do I get better? How do I keep evolving? And after we wrote that manifesto, it was shared with Regina King, who said, wow, this is really my story. And we engaged with her in the Oscars of 2020 for the first time. And she told her story and wove in what Cadillac meant to her, and how there was the similarities between us, really. And it was so powerful because it was, and authentic is such an overused word, but really when something is true, when you're tapping into a truth, when you're tapping into a truth about yourself, when you're tapping into a truth about the brand, about society, that's when there's real power. And so I think, that's one example, but there's many of where, something else that we did recently with RZA, and we have AKG, which is very high-end audio in our vehicles. So Escalade was launching our AKG partnership as we worked with RZA, who has a huge history with AKG, but just obviously, he's a brilliant, passionate person with a true passion for amazing audio. And so that, again, that truth about him and our vehicle and the authenticity, those are the times when the things that we do, I think, are really powerful. And so, there's, examples across the spectrum, but I think that's really the key to it. Now, it does create some, that can't be your media plan. That just needs to be part of like the conversation that you're having. But that's not going to be there's still so many other things and jobs that we have to be done with media.
Yeah, I want to get to a little bit of that, which is the job of media. You've complimented your team on this call. We know it's been a tricky 2 years for many leaders out there to maintain connection to your team, be helping them through this life experience we're all going through, and then be meeting the audience where they are as a brand. So can we switch gears a little bit to talk about your leadership style, how you're organizing your team, what 22 looks like in terms of the team you're standing up to deliver on these really audacious goals for the brand?
I think, our team, we really focus a lot on how to be forward thinkers, how to be first, how to do things differently, because I think that's when we really break through. My team, just the team structure, we have a brand strategy and research group who really help us look at what is the consumer insight and what do we need to be looking at 2 years out, what's forward thinking for us. And they also manage our global. Then we have a product and content group, and they really look at what are the products we're bringing to market? How are we bringing them to market? What are the key important things that we need to be messaging? And what is really the marketing plan around that? Then we have a channel activation team, and that team is all about anywhere where we're interacting with customers, whether that is on TV, whether that is in digital media, on our own sites, CRM, the whole gambit. And the reason that I have that on one team, and we have an audience person, is that we want to be managing the conversation across. So if you're someone who's interacted with us, who's interested in a vehicle, we want to be personalizing that content, whether it's out on the web or it's on our website or it's in the emails you receive. So that team all works together. And then we have a branding and consumer experience team who really looks at how does our brand show up? What does that look like? What does that feel like? We just went through a whole new Vis ID last year and brand purpose. And so that team is really bringing that to life. So I think, as we look at 2022, we're transitioning. We're going to have our first EVs on the road. It's a really exciting time. And so, I've said before, I really think the biggest part of Cadillac's an amazing brand. And the more that I've gotten into it and the longer that I've been here and understand, this year we turn 120 years old, and we have this history of innovation and really having, standard of the world. It's an amazing history. And so I feel like my job is to unfold that story for everyone else so they understand it the way that me and my team do. And so I think that's, with those people, that's what we're doing this year. And we're really when I look at Cadillac EV and I've seen the products of the future, I am so excited about where this brand is going.
Ooh, I want you to share the things that you're not supposed to share, but I won't put you on the spot. Talking about, audiences and the customer, and thank you for going through how you organize your team, but it sounds like you're at your best when you have the data and the insight that matters to inform all of the future planning. And we know in this environment that it's harder and harder to have that quality and scale of data with the ever-evolving landscape around signals to understand who customers are, understand their identity and their behaviors. How are you evolving just your analytics and data strategy to keep pace with the market, and what partners maybe are really, really working for you?
Yeah, I was going to say, partners for us are key on this one. So when we look at it, we have, the owner data and the people who've interacted with us, we have that data. And I think, we've had a very solid strategy for years on that. As we look at cookie deprecation and how are we going to evolve into that, we've worked very closely with our agency, Cara. They have a platform called M1, And within that, that's where we did our modeling of the whole US. They have the entire US on this platform, stripped from PII, with a lot of information and a lot of direct connections so that we don't need to rely on cookies anymore. So we can define our audience there, and we don't need to rely on a lot of other partners, both from a, like cookies and finding our audience, and also from protecting information, so by having sort of a safe room that we start in, and then going out and finding our audience that way, I think it's really set us up for the future. That's not to say that we're there or that it's going to be easy. And I think, as we've taken away a lot of the cookie data that we had, measurement is the area that's become harder. I think, I'm someone who loves data and statistics, and I was so passionate about multi-touch attribution for years, and it's really just, it needs to be different now in how we approach that. So I think looking at measurement, cross-channel measurement, and how we understand how audiences are acting, that's the thing that I think I'm really trying to solve. You almost go back to more of a modeled, if MTA was actual transactions and Bayesian statistics laid on that, we're almost going back to a more modeled version of that to understand, because now you're working with a few different partners in safe rooms and trying to model that back in. So I think that's been more of the question, as we start to look at data strategy and analytics.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, as you gave a great example about how you're looking at the American population and understanding them for the future, but then there's the customer really understanding that they own their data. And we know that's an evolving space. What do you forecast to be the way a brand plays a role direct to consumer, to value exchange against that data? Because the more information you get from them, you've given 5 or 6 examples here, you can stand up the best connection and the best way Cadillac can show up in that customer's life. And I know that goes beyond what probably sits in the M1 data set today.
For sure. And I think this is something, as I look at the trends that I see, the things that I hear, I'm going to go off course from what you just said to bring it back, which is there's a lot of talk now about subscription fatigue. And you really are starting to have people, how many subscriptions do I have? What am I paying for? What am I getting for that? And I think people are starting to realize why they used to like TV way back in the 50s, newspapers, those were really always supported by advertising. And as we've gotten into more modern times, we forget that advertising is supporting the content that we want. And what I think is going to happen is that people are going to start to understand that their data becomes a currency. So instead of, paying for however many subscriptions, if different partners will give you access to content, whether that's movies and TV shows or that's online news or whatever it is, I think there's going to be places where people are going to start thinking not, how do I protect all my data? I don't want anyone to have it, but who are the people that I trust? And what am I getting in return for it? So I really think as that type of thing evolves, as a brand, it'll give us a lot of opportunities because people will be opting in to hearing about things, to interacting. And it'll also be, the onus will be on us at that point to make sure that it's interesting enough that people do want to engage, or they do want to exchange their data, or they do want to, say, hey, here's who I am, Cadillac. I want you to know through whoever.
Yeah, Trevor made a comment in the chat saying storytelling is key. And I think that resonates with the scenario you're painting, which is, yes, we need to make advertising great again so that it, not to say it's not great everywhere or terrible everywhere, I should say, but that it really does complement the why we pick up the newspaper, the why we tune in to watch a great movie, and that the advertising feels like a natural, partner to that content and not something so disruptive and so annoying. And gosh, I'd rather just go back to the subscription experience. So how are you thinking about creative for Cadillac in that environment where, yes, I totally believe you that this is going to shift back. We'll see more scaled audiences back in ad supported models, but Cadillac will have to show up in a really specific and special way.
Yeah, and I think it'll depend on where we are and what we're doing. But I think to go back to the example of Lyric and Electric Kitchen, we need to be contextually relevant. And we need to be interesting. So how do we make sure that we have content that people want to interact with? Like, if you're watching the Food Network, do we then have our 60-second documentary because you're going to know who Chef Nikki is? Or if you are watching The Voice or something else that might be more music related, then are we looking at the RZA content? Or are there integrations into some of these things? And I think that's, some of the things that we're really trying to look at is what are some meaningful integrations where we can show up. I think, one of my personal favorite examples of this was, it was in October of 2020. So like we were still prime pandemic, but really starting to get kind of tired of things. And it was really getting hard to not see family, et cetera. And James Blake was coming out with a new single. He's a Grammy award-winning artist. And we were just launching the Escalade. And we did something where it was honestly, in the moment, it was really powerful and emotional. We had people who were his biggest fans. They thought that they were going to get to hear his new song in the Escalade because the Escalade has this amazing, AKG sound system it just envelops you. It's absolutely amazing. But what we actually did was we drove them to this airplane hangar, and they had a private concert with James Blake in a very socially distanced. Everyone was in their own pod, socially distanced and safe, but they got to have a moment that was something not only just amazing, because this is one of your favorite artists, but in that moment of being stuck at home, in that moment of just wanting to go out and see a concert or see live music or whatever. So I think figuring out what is the James Blake concert, the RZA, all of these things that we've talked about, what is that for each of these? And how do we really make sure that we're doing powerful things as a brand? That's going to be how we're going to really engage with people.
Yeah, and yet those connections, and Chris Pace has a question that I'm going to kind of tie in here from our Q&A. Cadillac and GM specifically have had a history of these surprise and delight moments, dropping cars off at people's houses, funding road trips, bringing James Blake to them. But scaling it obviously matters so much, again, to drive that experience. So is that a model that's here to stay? I mean, you've given a bunch of examples about it, but I guess I still question, how do you buy media against that?
Yeah, and so, we're really starting to think about, there's a few things, right? Like there's the basic automotive in market. We've got this machine running. You're looking for a vehicle. How do we make sure you have all the information you want? Then there's your more traditional media plan. And if that used to be this much of the budget, now it's like this much. And we're working with traditional media. And then we're really looking at, how do you create connections at scale? What are the different ways that we can do that? And, we're going to try a lot of things. Sometimes we're going to succeed. Sometimes we're going to fail, but we can't keep using the old model because no one is reacting to that anymore. It's just getting harder and harder. So I think, the future is really figuring out those ways. And we're always open to trying new things, because I think, if you think about your own experience with brands and when it's meaningful and when you care about what you're watching and when you just want to hit skip, it's really important that we get this right.
Yeah. Well, as we reach the end of our talk, I do want to spend a little bit of time on just what keeps you up at night and what, is scaring you the most in your job right now.
Yeah, I think, being able to move fast enough, really. Things change really fast. I think, we just, how fast can we move? And I don't want to miss something big that's happening. I think there's so much to be capitalized on when you're kind of a first mover on things. And as we look at both from a media perspective and, driving to EV, which is a huge focus for Cadillac.
Yeah, and how do you keep your talent at that pace?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to scan really quick the chat and questions if anyone wants to throw something last minute in. But
I see a comment about don't let experiential go the way of the manual transmission. And I have to give like a little shout out to our Blackwing vehicles, which are some of the last of the manual transmission. So I'd say with experiential, we're trying to make sure that we build experiential for the future and don't just throw away what works or what's amazing.
Exactly. And what everybody really wants to know is the lyric, how to get a lyric list is closed. No more room on the wait list. I mean, how big is this production cycle going to be? I know it's referenced as 2022, which means what, sort of end of this year?
So there will be vehicles that will, within a few months, we're going to start having vehicles that are built and you'll start seeing them on the road. Stay tuned. We're working on the list, but I think, also go talk to a Cadillac dealer because they can definitely help you with how to get into the next round. The debut edition is sold out, but there will be many more opportunities.
Well, it's an incredible car and congratulations. Everyone's saying that it's going to beat the Tesla X and that it's got much more dreamy experiences in it. And so I'm in California, and that's a big thing because this neighborhood and most of California is Tesla X territory. So I think we'll see a lot of Cadillacs, specifically the Lyriq, on the road here in LA.
I'm looking forward to that.